concludes the items under recognitions and donations. We don't have any items removed from consent this evening, so we can proceed then with our business items in section 7. The first item is 7A, which is to receive the city department equity, let me try that again. To receive the city department equity initiatives update for 2020 and 2021. And I believe, Mr. Trudgeon, you will be starting off this item.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. We're very pleased to be here to talk about the efforts the city has undertaken in this past year. I just have a couple opening thoughts, and then we will go around to each department to talk about what they have been working on in the last year. And then I will actually do Chief Brosnahan's part of that. And then at that point, we can certainly open it up for questions and comments. So in recognition of the 1-year anniversary of the George Floyd murder this past May 25th, staff would like to provide tonight the City Council and the community an update on the equity initiatives city departments have been working on in the last year. As the City Council is aware, the staff and council have been working directly on race equity issues since 2018 with participation in the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, or GARE program. We were on our equity journey when the shocking event happened last May. As the city staff and city council reflected in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, it was clear to everyone that while the city had begun race equity work, much more meaningful work needed to be done in our community. Tonight, we are here to present what the city departments have done in relation to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Finally, as you will see, our equity work is not the responsibility of one person. It's the role of every department, every staff person, and every elected and appointed official for Roseville. So we will start off tonight with Police Chief Erica Scheider with her part of the presentation. And I would suggest for the flow of the presentation, we go through the presentation and then we can certainly answer any questions or react to any comments that you may have as part of that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Scheider.
Great, thank you so much. First thing I want to start off by saying is that the police department is always visiting and revisiting our policies and programs for improvement, especially in ways that we can build trust and legitimacy and better serve our entire community. I plan to not go through everything on the slides. I'm just going to highlight a few particular items, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have at the end. On this first slide here, I want to highlight, first of all, highlight the work of our Multicultural Advisory Committee. We're approaching the 10-month mark of our monthly MAC meetings. And a lot of this initial 10 months has been building that foundation. And we're really excited to see what that group come up with in the future. We are currently working with 9 North so that we can update the community regarding the work of the MAC. We felt it was important for the MAC to do that updating and talk about the work that they've done. So look for that here in the next couple months. Another item I'll highlight on this first slide is our community action team, and that was started in January thanks to the investment by the community and our council. And really just a reminder, that group is dedicated to working alongside of our community partners and our businesses to find solutions to problems that affect the quality of life for all members of our community. Really that community action team hit the ground running. They're working on a lot of mental health related issues. Homelessness has certainly been a challenging in light of the pandemic, and a lot of quality of life issues. And the last thing I'll highlight just on this first slide is just our transparency page. We started that a number of years ago, but we're continuing to expand the information provided. We have our annual use of force report, our traffic report. We also added information on the 8 Can't Wait. And we've been talking with our MAC and also the community on what additional information that people may want to see on that transparency page. And I will note that there is a place that you can go submit input. So if there's something that the community would like to see, we certainly want to hear that input. On this next slide, just a few things that I'll highlight regarding our relationship with the Roseville area schools. Obviously, with the murder of George Floyd, schools across the country really reimagined or re-examined the role of school liaison officers. And last summer, we were part of talks with Roseville schools on how SROs in the school would look moving forward here in Roseville. And one thing that came from those discussions was, well, schools across the country had negative experiences. We did find that there was a number of things that were really working well here in Roseville, and those were highlighted in those discussions. With that, we know we need to make improvements, and we're always looking to do better. Some of the things that came out of that conversations with the school We've got a softer uniform for our school liaison officers, and also a lot more interaction with contemporary topics like police and race. Those have been incorporated this past year. We also have 2 of ROS students that are involved in some of our MAC discussions and have attended one of the meetings. So we're looking forward to building on that as well. We realize it's really important to have those student voices. And then during the spring march that they had, our school resource officer was able to help in ensuring that the students remain safe. And then following that march, the school liaison officer and I participated in a healing circle discussion that was facilitated by the Humanities Center. The topic was reimagining relationships between police and white and BIPOC youth. And just the last thing to highlight on this slide is our body cameras. Although this isn't a new program, we did complete our first independent body camera audit, which is required by law, and we were found in full compliance. And we continue to believe that body cameras are a valuable tool that helps us build transparency and accountability with our community. And on this last slide for the police department, I just really want to highlight our recruitment and our hiring. We obviously know it's important that we reflect the community we serve. We're working very hard and continue to work hard to put a lot of a focused and intentional recruitment program. Continues to be a priority. 20 years ago, we had 400 applicants sometimes for one opening. Now most agencies and many agencies are seeing less than 50 applicants. So we know recruitment is more important than ever. Through our Pathways to Policing program and our grant, we've been able to recruit more diverse candidates and offer tuition reimbursement. And we found that that's just a wonderful way to recruit a more diverse workforce. Another program that we just started this summer with another program we started this summer is a paid internship. And we've got our first paid intern this summer, which is a non-traditional law enforcement student. And before I turn it over to, I believe it's Parks and Rec, just some other in-progress things. We recently submitted a proposal to be a host site for a housing navigator through AmeriCorps to provide additional outreach and resources to our homeless individuals. And then we're also working with Ramsey County Social Services to talk about how we could bring an embedded social worker here to Roseville Police Department. We also continue our work with Northeast Youth and Family Services and the Community Advocate. And then lastly, based on some input from our MAC, we've continued to have increased engagement and outreach to our Asian American and Pacific Islander communities, knowing that the hate crimes in 2021 have really impacted some people. So again, a lot of work still in progress, a lot of work that we need to continue to do, but obviously this is really important and a priority for us. And with that, I'll turn it over to, I believe it's going to be Parks and Rec.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor, members of the council, I was just going to highlight a couple of initiatives that Parks and Recreation has going on. First is the Rec Connect program, which is a free youth recreation program for youngsters, specifically targeted for the Rice-Larpenteur area at Unity Park. That actually starts this week and runs through August 19th. It's a program that we had pre-pandemic, and it was well received and well attended. And it's meant really to be a pilot program that can be kind of moved around and modified to the needs in particular areas of the city. Another special event series, one that has been going on, but we continue to build on, is the Creative Crossroads Summer Entertainment series. It's on Sunday evenings at the ROG Amphitheater throughout the summer. That first concert was actually last week. This particular one was a Brazilian theme. We had over 300 participants and good diversity, and people had a lot of fun, and we're just continuing to build on that program, and that continues to be of more interest and continue to grow after when we continue to do that. We're also in the middle of a project of improving the inclusive playground in Central Park, which, if you recall, was funded entirely by the Friends of Roseville Parks through a very, very generous contribution of a donor. We're certainly thankful for that. That is anticipated to be open again soon with a kickoff in August. And that project is going well, but it's meant again to increase the inclusiveness of playground pieces. We continue also to connect with the Native Americans and others in the community as part of the analysis of Pocahontas Park name. We're getting quite a lot of feedback on that. We're continuing to seek input through the Discover Your Parks program, which is again a series that goes to all areas of the community throughout the summer. The Parks and Recreation Commission is heavily involved, and they will be monitoring a table at these Discover Your Parks, trying to gather input on not only the park system, but the Pocahontas Park. We're going to have a display to one, make the community aware that this discussion is going on, and two, to have something kind of in the end that we can kind of pull together. They're planning also a listening session in September, specifically regarding the Pocahontas Park name. We've also expanded our program registration software to include gender options outside of male and female. And along with that, we're working with our registration software provider to help us explore ways to capture additional demographic information on program participants. As we all know, the data is going to be important as we continue to kind of work through this. And then finally, all of our staff recognize the importance of this topic, are excited about it, are committed to it, and continue to seek out and participate educational opportunities on their own through state and local and national organizations. And there's quite a lot of opportunities for that. So we're continuing to work on this as a department. And that's kind of the highlights of what we have going on at this time.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Lonnie. Mayor, members of the council, community development has been working on a number of issues. I'm just going to highlight a few here. The first item on this slide is the zoning code update. We had 2 equity and inclusion community engagement sessions early on in the process. And we also have an online idea board. And I know many of you have visited that since it initially went up, and some comments have been added recently. So if you haven't visited it in a while, you could visit it again. And we are specifically asking for equity and inclusion concerns or ideas as a part of that online engagement tool. Most of the feedback that we received on the equity and inclusion engagement sessions surrounded housing very exclusively. And so 2 ideas that the Planning Commission is exploring currently related to equity and housing is reducing the minimum lot size requirements and expanding the allowance of a couple of other housing types in our LDR districts. And so the Planning Commission is actively working on that. We'll have an update for the council in the next month, and then it won't be in front of you till probably August or September. Moving on, we are working on joining Just Deeds. This is a program that will assist residents in discharging discriminatory covenants from their property deeds. We have brought this forward to the HRIEC, and the only thing that is delaying bringing this forward to the City Council is we're waiting for the raw mapping data from Mapping Prejudice. And I just heard last week that that data should be available in August. And if you haven't looked at the map, which is in the HRIEC packet, and then there's a webinar on the county's website, you'll note that Roseville is probably the second highest in terms of just the sheer number of these that exist in the county, second to the city of St. Paul. And then as a part of that, staff wants to work on discharging any discriminatory covenants from some city-owned property, and we know there are a few involved. Moving on, we also have been working on a first generation down payment assistance program. That'll be in front of the EDA at the next meeting in order to authorize beginning that. And I want to make sure that's not to be confused with first time home buyer. There are first time home buyer programs already out there. This is specific to first generation, and it would offer $25,000 of down payment assistance. And this is really hoping to broaden home ownership for some groups that may not easily be able to access it. On a somewhat related note, we're also working with Open to Business on a small business assistance program that would help provide capital to BIPOC businesses. And this will be funded with existing EDA levy funds. And then I also think it's important to recognize a lot of the public finance assistance that the EDA and City Council has put into some affordable housing projects over the last 1.5 or 2 years. Most of this is new construction specific to rental housing, but we also have been working on sort of a prospective NOAA preservation project over at the Brittany Marion Apartments. And so that is some specific focus that the city's been working on for new housing. An item that's not on this slide because the slide was prepared a couple of weeks ago was the EDA's authorization of the Choose Local or Work Local program. That is going to target BIPOC businesses as well. And so I wanted to make sure I highlighted that. In addition to the last item on the slide, we do have scheduled for a future EDA discussion sort of an informational conversation about inclusionary housing and tenant notification ordinances. Again, going back to that zoning code update item, the overwhelming community interests surrounding equity and inclusion went back to housing. So we think that's an important conversation to have. And that's all for community development. I think Public Works is next.
Thank you, Janice. On the Public Works side, we've really been focusing our efforts recently, at least, on the procurement side of equity and inclusion. And you may recall, as a part of the process for selecting our next recycling contractor, we did add a diversity, equity, and inclusion component to our RFP for that contract. And while it wasn't, we didn't see anything incredible in those results. There was a pretty drastic difference between the two proposals we had within that DEI area. And we're hoping that working with our community partners, our peers around us, and as a matter of fact, Ryan Johnson presented to a group of recycling coordinators and such in the county, talking about that very component, that diversity, equity, inclusion component RFP to others. We hope to get other communities to do the same thing, and that will put pressure on those recycling contractors to lift up their efforts in equity and inclusion and recognize the importance of it in meeting the community goals and values in those areas. So that's a procurement side. Not noted in here specifically is we also want to take some of the lessons that Ramsey County is experiencing and some of the efforts that they're doing and even MnDOT and some of the larger agencies in their procurement processes to continue that in requiring BIPOC participation or minority participation in the contracting, maybe even requiring prevailing wage on contracts that don't currently require prevailing wage. Currently federal projects and state aid projects require prevailing wage, but we don't require that on some of our smaller contracts because of the concern about lack of competition then. Not as many contractors may bid for that project, but let's get past that barrier so that more and more of the contracts will require it, and that will push the contractors to offer the prevailing wage on all of their jobs. So that's something that we're really going to push hard on over the next year or so and learn and implement some lessons learned from other agencies. Job descriptions, every time we hire a new person, every time we create or modify or recreate a position description, we go through and add some language in there about equity and inclusion. We want to make sure that people that come to work for the city of Roseville recognize that these initiatives, equity, inclusion, diversity, are important values for us, and that we want them to be aware of equity and inclusion as a part of their job, and that is a part of every position within the city of Roseville. So we're making an effort to add requirements and qualifications related to those items in our job description. And, you know, along the lines of hiring a diverse workforce and having a workforce that is representative of our community, we're trying to develop the workforce so that we have experienced, diverse candidates to choose from. We can't do that on our own, but we want to start working. We're starting to work with our union representatives in order to develop that workforce. And that's something that we're going to have to work with our professional organizations on. It's something that we're going to have to push our unions to develop the workforce, so that when we do have an opening at the city of Roseville, we have qualified individuals to hire. We also want to, you know, the police have a wonderful Pathways to Policing program. We want to try to figure out a way to do that at the maintenance level as well. You know, use some of our seasonal positions and opportunities to open up that pathway, that career pathway, to a more diverse pool. And again, get people experiences, and that they consider it a career opportunity, and they look to cities and counties and states and these public agencies for future career opportunities. Because right now, that's our biggest issue. We would love to hire a more diverse workforce. We haven't been able to get the candidates to apply for our positions. So with that, I will hand it off to Michelle Petrick for finance.
Thanks, Mark. In the finance department, we developed a new purchasing policy that is currently going through the GEAR Racial Equity Toolkit to make sure that we are looking at inclusionary rather than exclusionary, and also incorporating some of what Mark already said to encourage BIPOC and diverse companies. And that will hopefully be coming to the council for approval in the next month or so. At the License Center during the pandemic, we had utilized a scheduling module, which not only was efficient, but it also allowed people to request interpreters.
Oh, we've lost the audio. Ms. Petrick, we're not able to hear you right now. Am I the only one that lost the audio here? Okay. We need to figure out how to get that.
All right, this is Thomas Brooks. I'll go ahead and finish this one out because we're getting into administration next. So first, hi, Mayor and City Council members. So I believe Michelle was just getting to the interpreters. So there is a new list of sign language interpreters to assist with any hearing impaired customers. So continuing to add to the ways in which we can serve community members. There are already several staff who currently communicate and can speak Hmong. There is a partnership with the police department to assist with additional language needs. So the License Center is able to leverage some of the translators available to the police department. I believe administration is next, so I will.
Thank you. I am just trying to manage a couple multiple screens here. So Here we go. So thank you, Council and Mayor. So I am going to touch on a couple items that the administration department has been working on. And we have several different divisions within our administration department. Under communications, one of the things that we started was the creation of a racial equity web page. And this is really an opportunity for staff, for council, and for our community to see some of the work that we're highlighting here. It has a lot of the information, a lot of the transparency items that we talked about tonight, links to it, and it's just an opportunity for people to have kind of a one-stop shop that they can go to if they're looking for some of the information that we're presenting. Additionally, with communications, we've taken a conscious effort to include more inclusive imagery, both on our website as well as in our newsletters, to highlight the diversity of our community and make people feel that they're welcome here. We have started the closed captioning on Zoom, and looking back at when COVID first hit, we did a really strong push of providing information in multiple languages, particularly at the very beginning, but also along the way when it came to sharing information about vaccines. And although we didn't have necessarily all of the resources on our end to do some of those translation services, we do know that there are agencies out there that did. So we helped promote them. We served as kind of a go-between, making the connections for those people who may need that additional language. That also went with some of the other CARES Act funding and our census project. Looking into the volunteer area, one of the things that we have done with our volunteers is we do a spotlight of our volunteers, and we've put a focus on making sure that our volunteers are reflective of all of our volunteers. So making sure that when we highlight them, we are highlighting the diversity of ages, race, ethnicities, and abilities. We do have a really strong volunteer corps, and it's made up of all kinds of different people. And it's really important so that everybody sees that if they're interested in volunteering, they can. They are important and they are very valuable to our organization. We can't do a lot of what we do without our volunteers. We also worked with a BIPOC volunteer coordinator to review our volunteer application and our background check process, wanting to make sure that we weren't having any additional barriers that could prevent people from wanting to participate. We've also added some explicit equity language to our volunteer webpage. We've also worked with Every Meal for a distribution event, particularly out in Southeast Roseville, a couple different events also that might also be highlighted in the fire department, but we did help facilitate and coordinate that. On the next page here, as you've heard tonight, there's been a really strong focus on our workforce of our hiring and our recruitment. And one of the things that we have done prior to COVID hitting is we worked with an equity manager from a different city to develop an implicit bias training for our hiring panels, those who are going to be in interviews. We've had to roll it out kind of piecemeal just due to COVID and how everything went remote, but we are still in the process of working on that. As you've heard, multiple different departments talk about their hiring process. We are taking a look as jobs open with all of our job descriptions. So not only are we adding language to what skills and qualifications we're looking for when it relates to equity, we're also looking at kind of that education component and what those needs are for each job. As we know, there is some different opportunities available for people of color with different pipelines and everything. And sometimes that traditional path that you think of isn't necessarily the only way to a job. And so what we're really doing is we're really focusing on what are the skills that we're looking for, not necessarily what is the education. Doesn't mean that education isn't important, but we're really asking the questions to get at the heart of why is that the key. We've also started tracking a lot of our demographics of our applicants, as well as throughout the process. And you'll see that as part of our strategic racial equity action plan. That is one of the things that we are doing, is looking at where those applicants fall and what that process looks like, process mapping. Also reviewing, some of the scoring of applications, targeted recruitment, and also adding an equity focus to our interview questions. It's really a big job, and as you see, it's really encompassing all of our departments. So the effort across the organization is being coordinated through our human resources department. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Thomas for the rest of this piece, and he can jump in, and we are available for questions when you're done.
Thanks, Rebecca. So this is more of a recap of a lot of the information that you've all received periodically over the last several months. But in the spirit of recapping, just wanted to sort of reiterate that we are working with culture brokers pretty regularly, who is the DEI consultant, who has helped to sort of draft and finalize our strategic racial equity action plan, and will be with us and continuing to help us implement this through the second half of the year. We are currently in the process of working to begin implementation of the strategic racial equity action plan, which was presented at the last council meeting with sort of an updated timeline that just sort of walks through all of the various steps. It is very data driven, and that is what is driving the timeline and the significant length of that timeline. So both, or I should say, collecting and gathering that data, actually intentionally analyzing the data, and then working to develop solutions from there. So we're at the very beginning stages of that. We have it narrowed down to 3, what we're referencing as problem statements. So one is to work to diversify the workforce. 2 is to work to diversify our boards and commissions. And 3 is we want to use a racial equity lens or some sort of formal toolkit or decision-making process in all of our decisions throughout the city. We do have a strategy team that has worked up through this point to develop the SREAP document of the Strategic Racial Equity Action Plan. And they'll be continuing their work going forward and overseeing the implementation of it. So it is made up of a couple employees, including department heads from each department throughout the city. And as we continue to work through that SREAP document, we'll also continue to bring in additional resources as well, because we know that there's a lot there and we need as many hands in as possible. The city hired an equity and inclusion manager, so that is me. Very happy to be here, and I've enjoyed the last couple months. Develop community messages surrounding various situations, so really trying to communicate more directly with our community, and acknowledging some of the struggles or some of the realities of the environments that we're finding ourselves in. It's been an incredibly difficult last couple of years, and really working to be more responsive and really working to see the various communities that make up the city. We do have a monthly equity report that is put together by all of the department heads and communicated to council. There was an update to the commission application, so working to track demographics. This, of course, helps us with that problem statement number 2 and some of the solutions that we are looking to come up with to improve our recruitment process with commissions. And then there was an update to the youth commissioner application as well, working to make that more inclusive to our youth. Next up, I believe we have fire, which I'll turn it back over to Pat Trojan.
Thank you. I am standing instead for Chief Brosnahan, who was unable to make the meeting. I just want to talk about a few things the fire department has been doing. They have been involved in the GARE program since the beginning from the first start and continue to be on with the involvement in the strategy team. We do stay connected through the fire department through a lot of different groups in the community that are focused oftentimes on health and wellness. Participate in the Rice Carpenter Alliance, as well as the CHAT team and the Roseville AD team and the age-friendly Ramsey community. They serve all of our community, but as we know, oftentimes services to BIPOC community members are lacking. So I know in all those groups that has been a greater conversation and focus on that. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done on that, but that is beginning. So we're at the table for those conversations and assist where we can. During COVID, as we know, it affected everybody tremendously, especially in the early days. We also know that disproportionately, BIPOC communities have suffered both the effects in trying to get out of the situation that they're in due to COVID. We've tried to provide connections for healthcare access and working with other community partners. Early on, we did have a mask donation program where we received thousands of masks that we distributed to the community. And as mentioned earlier, the food partnership with Every Meal, we continue to have that operated up at the fire station and have done a few outreach events directly in Unity Park over the year. Yeah, the next slide. Multifamily licensing program, obviously that is a program that we have in place already, but you can't underestimate the importance of that program to making sure that we have safe and sanitary housing for our community members. We've really ramped that up over the past couple of years, and this is something that we will continue to work on. We know there needs to be continued work and diligence on this, and we're looking to continue to evolve that program and provide more advocacy, make connections for people that are running into issues with the housing and the landlord, but also making sure that the basics are met as well. And finally, something that we're real excited about, and you'll be seeing some of this in the upcoming 2022 budget, looking to create a pathways program for the fire department similar to the police department and really look at trying to recruit and train people that are traditionally in the fire department. The recruiting difficulties for female candidates as well as candidates of color really plague Minnesota right now, and that's something we're going to continue to work on. And instead of just looking for a scarce resource, we need to really focus on what are the root causes and why they're not coming into the fire department, and look to help train them, help give them resources to do that, and help get them interested. So this is going to be an effort that's going to be ongoing, and we'd like to kick that off here starting in 2022. So with that, I think that's the end of the fire department presentation. And I just want to thank all the department heads for here tonight. As you can see, this is a multi-department, all department effort here. This is something that is not just a flash in the pan. This is something that we are committed to, something that we'll continue to work on, and certainly appreciate all the support the council has given over the past year in ensuring that we have the resources available to do this, and as well as the support to go out and experiment and work on some new ideas. And so we certainly appreciate that. With that, I will stop and be happy to answer any questions or listen to any comments.
All right, thank you. Thank you to everyone who participated in the presentation and of course in the process of getting to the presentation as well. The work that's being done obviously is the most important part. The presentation just gives us the information on what's happening, but the actual work is the key. Are there questions or comments, feedback from council members? I see Councilmember Groff with his hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, as you said, you know, the presentation is just telling us what they've done, but this is impressive. I have to say, I'm very impressed with the work that's been done, and thank you, Pat, for bringing in the heads of all the departments. It was really helpful for me to, you know, see what's been done. I thought Chief Scheider's comment about the transparency on the website is really important for the residents to know about. I think that's a really useful tool for the residents to find out what's going on in the police department, because unfortunately there are a lot of things that are said in the community and things that come up, and they aren't accurate for Roseville because they use national information or they use something that's from larger cities. And I think that's a real tool for us to use educating. I was impressed with Lonnie Brocky's comments about inclusivity and what they're doing in the Parks and Rec department. That seemed light years ahead of what's happening in a lot of areas. And I know in some of the reading I've been doing that, and it's not city parks as much as it is national parks, but the BIPOC community uses those parks way at a lower rate than other segments of the population. So I think that's kudos to the Parks Department for addressing that. In public works, I just thought the piece that Mark Culver mentioned about the requests for proposal or RFPs is really important, even though others aren't doing that yet. To be a leader in that really makes me so proud of Roseville. So I'm not going to go down through all my notes here, but I'm very things that I really appreciate about this type of meeting is putting it all in place for me as a council member so I can see what you've been doing all year, because we hear it in bits and pieces, but when you put it all together, it's like very, very impressive to me. So I want to just thank you all very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Groff. Councilmember Strong.
Thank you, Mayor. I echo everything that Councilmember Groff said. I just also wanted to give my public support for the Just Deeds program. I participated in the Mapping Prejudice program, which helped create those maps that are moving forward with the Just Deeds. And that's just a really important piece for our community to see the value as a whole community, not just the council, but staff. And I just appreciate every department's really strong focus on doing the most, not just doing the minimum, but really putting a big effort. So I really appreciate everything that you've done, and all told, it's an amazing amount of things, and I look forward to seeing what we can do moving forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Atten.
I'd reiterate the comments of Members Strawn and Groff. Thank you both for those. I think they're right on. Also, I would like to highlight the police department's work as kind of leaders in our departments around the hiring process and looking for ways to recruit and train and support in the training a diverse workforce. And I think that's been several years in the making. So I appreciate current Chief Scheider as well as her past leadership and all of that work. And now I love seeing that spreading through other departments as we look at ways that we can do that. So appreciate that. Yeah, the maybe jobs in municipalities aren't the common thought for a lot of people, but how we can work to create a workforce is fantastic. So appreciate those efforts.
Thank you. Other feedback or questions from council members? Just on that note, I would note that probably a good partnership is with the school districts in terms of some of their programs of trying to connect their students with opportunities in vocations other than necessarily just the traditional path of going to college, because as we know, a lot of the trades out there are looking for employees, and you can earn a very good living in those trades as well. And some of those jobs are right here in municipalities, as Councilmember Atten mentioned, as well as staff. I did want to note a couple of things that just caught my attention. I know that sometimes for small businesses, prevailing wage requirements can be obstacles to participating in bidding processes because the cost of providing the prevailing wages may be prohibitive to them being able to participate or to do business in that way. So I would just encourage that as we look to include that in our process of getting bids on projects, that we try to engage with the BIPOC and minority-owned contractors themselves to make sure that we're not sort of providing an obstacle in the process, while at the same time trying to provide certainly clearly better wages for folks that are working in the industry. So that would just be a feedback and comment. And the other thing in terms of the equity aspect of RFPs, I think it's good to understand how the businesses themselves maybe have a diverse workforce or recruit a diverse workforce, and how they're incorporating equity into their business they're doing. But I think another piece of it is, especially with something like recycling, is how are perhaps members of diverse communities not always perhaps participating in recycling as much as the broader population, or are there ways to try to improve the service to make it work for everyone equally, and as well to make sure that everybody is being ecologically conscious in their decision making. So I think once again that could be something to look at in terms of how we incorporate equity into the contracting and RFP process. And then I just had a question to follow up with Chief Scheider on. I know a couple of years ago I was at an event involving the Roseville Police Explorers from the high school, And I was tremendously impressed with the number and diversity of participants that year in the Explorers program. And I was curious to see if we've continued to see a pretty high participation and a very diverse group of folks involved, or have we seen that drop off over the last couple of years, obviously with a lot going on in terms of law enforcement and the public view. Just wanted some feedback on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So our Explorer post is back up and running. Unfortunately, with COVID, there was a pause. And so our hope is to, again, continue to try to recruit more diverse students that may be interested in law enforcement, because the Explorers is definitely a recruitment tool for us. So now that we're getting back to normal, our hope is that those efforts will continue.
Oh, great, thank you very much, appreciate that. Any other questions or comments from council members on the information that we received this evening? Councilmember Willis.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks to staff that's gone forward and had this presentation here tonight. I do think it's important that we get this information out to the broader community as to what we are doing and how we are going about things. I think it's also important that recognize that while I think PD was certainly focused on diversity and inclusion issues, perhaps before some of the other areas of our municipality, of our city. I think, frankly, Councilmember Etten, I think, deserves some credit here for his advocacy and really pushing staff a number of years ago to look into the GARE process and to focus on that. So I really do think an acknowledgement there is important. And then also just an acknowledgement of, and not to pat ourselves on the back too much, but the acknowledgement that we are just getting started in this. And so let's be forthright with folks that this is the beginning, and there will be steps and decision points down the road and in the future. And so I think that is certainly an acknowledgement that this is really the start. This is by no means the end. And so I think that's an important acknowledgement to have going forward as well. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councilmember Wilmes. And I do want to provide, I see Councilmember Groff, you've got your hand up.
Just one more thing, if you'd indulge me. I want to thank Chief Seider for coming on Saturday to the Juneteenth celebration in Central Park. She and a great number of the police force were there, and it was really good to hear from them and talk about the work they're doing with the multicultural group that's formed. And it was a good event and beautiful weather, and I wanted to thank them for doing that.
Thanks for mentioning that, Councilmember Groff. Appreciate that. I do want to provide an opportunity for public comment on the information that's been presented this evening. So we'll open it up for public comment at this time. If anyone from the public wishes to make a comment or ask a question, we would just ask that you use the raise your hand feature in Zoom to let us know, and we can bring you into the meeting for your comment or question. Just as that's happening, we'll just remind folks that the council rule is a 3-minute time limit per speaker. We do ask that you begin your comments with your name and either your address or street if you're a resident of Roseville, or your city if not. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment or ask a question on our update on diversity initiatives and equity initiatives in the city? Once again, if you wish to do so, use the raise your hand feature in Zoom to let us know. And one more opportunity for any members of the public who wish to speak to this item. A reminder just to use the raise your hand feature in Zoom so that we can bring you in for your comment or question. All right, seeing no hands raised, thank you again for everyone for their work in this area, and look forward to future updates as well and all the things that will be going on.